Kamitakiapi, Leampetu Washde. Welcome to the ICT Newscast. I'm Shirley Sneve. In Maine, the Micmac tribe is strengthening its ties to the land and commitment to sovereignty. Stuart Huntington has the story.
It started as a hardscrabble community vegetable patch a generation ago in northwestern Maine. Then it moved to some tribal land up the road.
We had just acquired this property here in Caribou, and our council at the time decided that it would be a great place for us to have and start maybe a small farm. And that started for 4 acres for a good 10 or so years.
Today, using grants, grit, and forethought, the enterprise has flourished.
We've really grown by leaps and jumps, and now we're planting 30 acres.
With greenhouses and even chickens.
We have a small orchard, apple orchard. We have high bush blueberries, and then we do some melons, and we do a huge variety of vegetables.
And fish. The Mi'kmaq are fish people, but pollution in area waterways meant humans had to limit fish consumption to
1 fish a month. And for our culture, that wasn't going to be sufficient. You know, it's a primary protein for the Mi'kmaq Nation is fish. And so we said, well, maybe if we can't fish, then maybe we should grow our own fish.
A decade ago, the tribe installed a 3,000 square foot brook trout hatchery, adding protein to the produce, inching toward food sovereignty.
So all of these guys throughout here are about 12 to 16 inches long. We have a couple of 3-pounders in here, so a really couple big ones, but so these are our harvestable fish. These are the ones that the
But just wait till next year.
Right outside adjacent is where our new hatchery is going to be.
It's under construction today on the Micmac Farms property. The new hatchery will quadruple the tribe's trout production.
With our current setup right now, I have to grow them a little slower than I could, just because of the room and space inside the 2 tanks that we do have. With the new hatchery, it goes from 3,000 square feet to 9,000 square feet in a new hatchery, so it triples our space.
And their production, and their ability to serve the people. Micmac Farms provides tribal members food at no cost.
We get a grant from the government, and it allows us to provide our tribal members with what they need and the produce that they want without needing to pay for it at all.
About 85% of what we grow goes back to the community to support our food sovereignty.
And the core indigenous value of generosity. Witness the truck that loads food for 4 other Maine tribes.
The Wabanaki food truck that comes around once a month.
And then tomorrow I go to Township for the first Passamaquoddy, and then I go to Supply.
And so they'll pick up any extra fish that we have or vegetables as well from the farm. And then they deliver to all the other tribal sites here in Maine. And so they'll drop off the fish, and then they'll pick up, maybe the Passamaquoddies might have extra blueberries. So they'll pick up blueberries there and distribute them to the other tribes and drop off things that other tribes have extra. So it's a great partnership. Working together and using each other's resources has really been a game changer for, I think, the tribes here in Maine.
Impressed? There's more. The tribe recently reestablished stewardship over more than 100 acres of woods and is opening a sawmill.
We'll have the lumberyard set up here, of course, do all the cutting here. The wood kiln will be here, and then once the wood is dry...
With an eye towards vertical integration.
So that's what's great about this project, where it's tribal citizens working on tribal land, cutting tribal wood, and then we're going to take that wood, we're going to mill it, and then build 18 new homes for tribal citizens on our tribal properties.
Call it construction sovereignty, done just the way
our ancestors would have done, and steward that land, the best way possible. We're not going to go in and clear cut anything, of course.
And you guessed it, there's even more. The supply chain disruptions from the pandemic and recent changes to federal grant policies underscored a real need for self-reliance. The place to start? Power. Today, Micmac Farms gets about half of its electricity from tribal solar panels.
It's not a huge solar farm, but it was a great place to start with.
and has plans to eventually be fully self-sufficient.
So we're looking at projects right now for more solar and battery storage. So once we're able to add on the solar and the battery storage products to this, there should be no reason why we can't self-sustain. That's the dream. So 5 years. I'm hoping in 5 years that we've accomplished this.
From Mi'kmaq territory, I'm Stuart Huntington for ICT.
A North Carolina family made history during the Civil Rights Movement, standing against injustice. I spoke with Justin Lockamy about his family's role in ending segregation for the Coharie Tribe. The 1954 court decision, Brown v. Board of Education, ended segregation of schools. Southern states held out for years. While the decision focused on Black students, Native American students were also impacted. One case was in the news this summer, as a North Carolina historical marker was erected to remember a student sit-in at Dunn High School, home of the Coharie Tribe. Justin Lockamy is proud of the role his relatives had in the event.
My great-grandfather, who I had the privilege of knowing for the first 10 years of my life, he didn't tolerate much injustice from people for very long. So he and his brother this was shortly after Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, which ordered desegregation of schools. Starting in maybe 2 years later, there was a consistent push from my great-grandfather, his brother, and some of the family who were located in Harnett County to push that school system to actually let their students in to first it was provide us with a teacher and some facilities so we can actually support high school education. That way our kids don't have to be bused all the way into the neighboring county. Those requests were repeatedly denied. 1960 rolls around, and the frustration for my great-grandfather and his brother was pretty great. And the family story goes, on New Year's Eve, as the clock turned into 1960, my great-grandfather Eugene Chance and his brother James, they actually put some sticks of dynamite and blew up the bus. And that's what happened. They got into some good trouble, created some property damage. They were hauled to court, but because of the lack of evidence against them specifically, they were ultimately not charged. But pretty much everyone knew, wink, wink, nod, nod, what had happened. This was January 1960. And just to put this in context, in the North Carolina Civil Rights Movement, I think the Greensboro sit-ins of the 4 African-American kids who sat in at the diner there, that was a month later.
In spite of this lack of transportation to school, white officials did not give in. Justin's great-aunt Juanita Chase Caldwell said in an interview with the North Carolina Indian Heritage Commission, Coharie families took it to court, but civil disobedience continued.
Dad said that we couldn't give up, that we had to make sure that we went to that school, some way, somehow. So there was a protest. The morning that we all arrived up there, I have never seen so many policemen in all my life. But it was days that we were there, like maybe a week with everybody. And then there was just Jean, my cousin, and myself. And Huey Powell went, I think, a couple of days. He wasn't there very long. I never saw him, heard of him going in a classroom or anything. But Jean and I went into a classroom and actually sit down. They ignored us. The teachers they weren't rude, but we weren't there. The kids were so quiet because they weren't really sure what was going to happen.
As part of the effort, once this blew up in town, is that my aunt Juanita her and her cousin had written Eleanor Roosevelt a letter, because at that time Eleanor Roosevelt had a column in the New York Times, and she actually wrote about it in her column in the New York Times and brought some national attention to bear and some more resources. So for about 2-3 years there was this protracted litigation as they tried to get Harnett County to do more and more.
If I write her, maybe she'll help us. Didn't think she would, but I thought maybe she would. And sure enough, wrote that letter, sent it off. I think I wrote it in with a pencil, and signed our name to it, Jean and my name to it. And sure enough, She answered.
They finally admitted admitted high school students there to Dunn schools, and this was before African Americans were even allowed to go to Harnett County schools. So the Indians were the first through the door, which is amazing.
For ICT, I'm Shirley Sneve. Tribes across the country are turning to golf as a new driver of economic development while honoring its land and the history. Here's Daniel Herrera Carbajal.
Land is deeply embedded in Native cultures, and for Mark Wagner, a golf historian and author of Native Links, the game of golf is also about land.
Land is key. Like, the game of golf requires the most amount of land of any game in human history, right? Like an 18-hole course requires roughly 250 acres. And in Native culture, land is everything, right? I mean, land is, one of the ethics of Native culture is, the land is going to outlive us, right? We are, the earth is our mother, right? So I think that there's a natural kind of ethic there of being close to the land.
While the sport is often associated with white elitism and criticized as a, quote, rich man's game, Native people have embraced the sport since Oscar Smith Bunn played in the U.S. Open golf tournaments in 1896 and 1899.
Some Native golfers who really succeeded, Althea Gibson, Joe Lewis, Orville Moody, they weren't identified as Native, right, because of the history of loss of culture, the history of the white press not acknowledging Native culture, and so on and so forth. So my book is an attempt to try and address that and identify Native contributions to the game. And, like the Orville Moody story is tremendous. He was full-blooded Choctaw, but he had joined the Army and they identified him as Sarge, right? When he won the 1969 U.S. Open, which was the 69th U.S. Open, interestingly enough, Choctaw Nation held like a big celebration for him. They gave him an eagle headdress. They had a parade. His mother was in the convertible, and but the press didn't acknowledge that at all. So my book is trying to kind of correct some of those misperceptions.
This long history of Native golf took a turn in the 1970s and 1980s when tribes, aided by the revenues from gaming and fee to trust programs, began to develop their own golf courses on tribal lands.
Beginning in the early 1990s, Native tribes began to build golf courses on reservations, and that has created a culture of golfers and golf tourism.
The Mescalero Apache started things off with the Inn of the Mountain Gods in 1975. The golf courses that followed have combined the economic visions of the tribes with renowned course designers and players. One of the most economically successful tribes in America, the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community of Minnesota, added golf to their holdings in 2002 when they purchased Lone Pine Country Club. The course was remodeled by architects Garrett Pill and Paul Miller and reopened in late summer 2005 as the Meadows at Mystic Lake. The facility has since drawn numerous awards and recognitions. While Native reservations were not picked for their abundant resources and prime real estate, Wagner says tribal nations still look to be good stewards of the land when designing and constructing golf courses.
I think that Native people come at it from, we're not just going to bring in bulldozers, we're going to talk to the land, we're going to talk to the great spirits, however you define that, and say, hey, we're going to put in a golf course, but we're not going to disturb the cultural artifacts that might be there, any graveyards that might be there. So I think there's a real accent on honoring the ancestry of who was there before. So, for example, Nota Begay is brought in as a cultural consultant a lot of times. And they'll say, how should we work this land? What can we do to preserve any artifacts or other things there? Preserve the native spirit of the land. So I think it's really principle number one, as far as the tribes come at it from that perspective of honoring the land, stewarding the land, and water, big issue, right? To not use pesticides in places, to honor the earth by sustainable practice, using less water. All of these things are part of native golf culture.
Looking ahead, golf courses are being seen by many tribes as an economic engine that can complement other aspects of a tourism economy.
Golf, believe it or not, not only gaming, which began in 1988, but now golf is driving that economy on native land. Now, it's complicated, right? I'm not an advocate for, golf being the way that tribes come back,
For ICT News, Daniel Herrera Carbajal.
Tribes in Wisconsin are learning Native culture through language. Here's Erica Aisi in partnership with PBS Wisconsin.
Trinity Caldwell is learning how to speak Menominee, an indigenous Native American language.
The ability to talk in the language freely, that to be able to do it now today is a blessing because our elders weren't allowed that freedom.
Caldwell's Native ancestors spoke languages that are now nearly extinct. Adult language learners at the Menominee U Language Campus are on a mission to revitalize their indigenous language from a past of systematic erasure.
Like even just saying poso wasn't always the most comfortable thing right away.
Really?
Yeah, it wasn't ubiquitous. I didn't really hear it a lot.
There
was no meaningful social or community access to the language.
Ron Korn Jr., Director of Revitalization for Menominee U, says their doors opened in 2024 after creating a community of Native language learners online.
That means if you're not looking to be a teacher or be a student, there was no place for you in revitalization.
The adult learners earn a stipend to normalize speaking Menominee on the reservation.
When we go and patronize any of the places here on the reservation or do our business, be it at tribal offices and or anywhere else, that we might see people who have taken their opportunity to join this revitalization and do that same business in the language.
Alexander Medina says he's now exposed to more conversational Menominee vocabulary that his non-native stepfather dissuaded him from learning as a child.
Sometimes it was kind of heavy-handed and kind of bad how much he didn't want us to basically just be be Menominee, like use res slang. We'd get in trouble.
But now as you're learning the language, does it have an impact on your self-esteem and your identity?
Absolutely. It kind of clicked to me that it's not illegal, it's not banned anymore, so we should do what we can to salvage the culture we have left.
Language revitalization efforts stem from a troubling past.
The boarding school experience was very effective in what it set out to do, which was to kill the Indian, save the man, and every man, woman, and child. And our ancestors, 3-4 generations over, had this horrific life experience.
For over 60 years, there are at least 11 federal Indian boarding schools across Wisconsin, including 2 here in Menominee Nation in Kashina. These schools were designed to culturally assimilate Native American children into American culture by forcibly removing them from their families and banning them from speaking their native tongue.
The most common thread that you see in conversations about language loss really began in the 19th century, and it often revolves around federal Indian boarding schools and Indian schooling in non-native institutions.
Sasha Maria Suarez, professor of history and American Indigenous Studies at UW-Madison, says the federal Indian schools across the state were managed by religious institutions, which colonized Native American children and prohibited their language. What was it to be replaced with?
English. Even if they went into federal Indian boarding schools with no grasp of the English language, that was really the only language they were permitted to speak.
Severed ties to indigenous languages has been a generational issue for all tribal communities.
For over a century, these kinds of policies that have tried to diminish and disrupt indigenous language use.
My great-grandma, she spoke Menominee. There were some things that were passed down and some things that weren't, and the language just was not one of them.
Menominee, Ho-Chunk, Oneida, Ojibwe, Stockbridge Munsee, and Potawatomi are some of Wisconsin's indigenous languages. Suarez says Wisconsin's indigenous languages did not completely lose their voices.
Those elders who had been to schools, who maintained an awareness of their indigenous languages, started using education to teach their languages to the next generations.
In Bad River, for a new generation of language speakers and singers, Dylan Jennings of the band Bijiki wants Ojibwe traditional sounds to be a part of the modern music scene.
We're, expressing ourselves and making things that we like, but another part of it too was using our platform to normalize our sounds, our style of singing, and our language.
Their song Unbound is about preserving Bad River waters.
We just have to remember to utilize our language and all those tools that we've been given.
And today, all federally recognized Native tribes in Wisconsin offer Indigenous language learning opportunities.
The founding of revitalization efforts in those decades following World War II demonstrates really clearly how boarding schools failed in terms of trying to dismantle and disrupt Indigenous languages.
In 2021, Governor Tony Evers issued an executive order formally apologizing for Wisconsin's role in the Indian boarding schools era. Through state and private funding, language revitalization efforts at Menominee U plan to continue.
I don't have an education beyond high school, but I have a resilient spirit that's willing to give all that it can to see through the revitalization of the language.
For ICT, from the homelands of Menominee Nation, I'm Erica Aisi.
Haudenosaunee cousins are making music, rock music. Stuart Huntington tunes in.
Two Haudenosaunee cousins, Rex Lyons.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And Irv Lyons.
1, 2, check.
Have been making music together for half a century.
30 miles away from home. So tired of being alone. Hope you're waiting at the
They've written songs, cut albums, and won numerous regional awards in their native Haudenosaunee territory.
Too much, but these are all Sammy Awards, and it's the Syracuse Area Music Award. And
Today, their latest album, White Cadillac, is positioned to, fingers crossed, earn the pair their first Grammy nomination.
Yeah, baby, I'm coming home.
That would make their mothers happy, as is only fitting in their matrilineal Haudenosaunee traditions.
My musical journey started very young. My mother had an outstanding record collection, and she loved music. So I was exposed to some extraordinary music right out of the gate.
I heard music at a young age. My mom had a record collection. I was 4 years old.
My mom had Taj Mahal on vinyl, Taj Mahal, Natural Blues.
And she had a old record player with the 45, 33, 78. And I would put her singles and albums on, and that was my introduction. I listened to all of it. Chubby Checker, Johnny Burnett, from Fats Domino, Everly Brothers,
Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, you name it. I had Merle Haggard. These things were like, you can't get any better, I guess, education, to start at where everything came from.
Of course, it wasn't all roses and sunshine.
Yeah, after first, it's very, my son has an interest. Let me support that. Let me nurture that. But when it's rock and roll, it can be kind of a double-edged sword. And I remember giving her a lot of headaches and saying, turn that down, and...
What's the old joke? How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. That's something the cousins take to heart.
So here's where the magic happens here. This is the band room. This is kind of give you...
They practice with their band, the Ripcords, every week. It's a discipline Rex takes partly from his career as a professional lacrosse player.
Being an athlete, I know that if you don't do your reps and you don't go to practice and get in condition, you're not going to perform to your best ability if you're not prepared properly. So if you do your reps and you have the muscle memory, you've done all of your reps and you're prepared properly, when it comes game time, show time, you're able to do it at a much higher level.
And let their indigenous sensibilities take wing.
It's something that's very inherent in Native people. We love music, and it's something you go around the world. We love music. I mean, it's the heartbeat, it's a pulse, you know, there's algorithms there. And I think they go very deep with indigenous people.
Music will transport you to a place that is peace and safe. And then I especially like the summer playing gigs because we get to play in the natural world. So when you mix the natural world with music, when you're outside, what the Creator gave us, and the mixture of that, playing music and being in the natural world, it's ethereal, it's sublime.
For ICT from the homelands of the Onondaga Nation, I'm Stuart Huntington.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.